Hello everyone and welcome to AI Research Roundup. I'm Alex. Today, May 10th, 2025, we're looking at SymmetricDiffusers, learning discrete diffusion on finite symmetric groups. This ICLR conference paper, published January 22nd, so about 3.5 months ago, introduces a new way for AI to understand permutations, or finite symmetric groups, which are all possible orderings of items. This is challenging because the number of orderings grows incredibly fast. The paper uses a discrete diffusion model, which learns by first mixing up an order, then carefully learning to unmix it. Okay, so this first figure really helps visualize their approach. We see this process, called a discrete diffusion model, applied to finite symmetric groups. Remember, those are all the possible orderings of a set of items. The diagram shows how an ordered set of images, perhaps 3 handwritten numbers from the MNIST dataset, which is a common collection of digit images, gets progressively mixed up. This is the forward diffusion process. The little hexagonal diagrams above illustrate the likelihood of different orderings at each stage, starting from fully mixed, then gradually becoming more ordered. Then, crucially, the model learns to reverse this mixing, step by step, to get back to the original sorted order. This reverse diffusion process is where the learning happens. Building on that idea of mixing and unmixing, this next figure gives us more detail on the mixing part, which they do using something called a riffle shuffle, a bit like shuffling a deck of cards. Alright, so part A here shows how the total variation distance, which is just a measure of how jumbled up the items are compared to a perfectly random state, changes with more riffle shuffles. They find about 15 shuffles, marked by the red dot, is enough to get things thoroughly mixed. Then, part B helps them create an efficient denoising schedule for the unmixing process, by looking at how different the jumbledness is between various shuffle steps. Alright, so now we see how this approach stacks up in practice. This table presents results for sorting those 4-digit MNIST images. It compares their SymmetricDiffusers method against others across various sequence lengths. We're looking at how well they sort, using measures like Kendall-Tau, which checks how close the model's order is to the perfect one, and also the rate of completely correct sorts. Their method performs very well, and notably, it maintains strong performance, outperforming others as sequences get much longer, like with 52 or 200 items. This really shows its strength in handling these complex ordering tasks. Okay, so moving beyond just sorting digits, this table shows how SymmetricDiffusers tackles jigsaw puzzles. We're looking at results on noisy MNIST, a visually noisy digit dataset, and CIFAR10 with more complex images. It's compared against others on puzzles of varying sizes. Using metrics like Kendall-Tau for order, plus accuracy and completely correct puzzle percentages, their approach shows really strong performance, especially as puzzles get bigger, like the 5x5 and 6x6 noisy MNIST ones. Lower scores for RMSE, root mean square error, and MAE, mean absolute error, also confirm it makes fewer mistakes. Alright, so now we're looking at how this discrete diffusion model handles the traveling salesman problem. That's the classic challenge of finding the shortest possible route to visit a number of cities exactly once and return to the starting city. This table shows results for 20 city and 50 city instances. SymmetricDiffusers is compared against both traditional operations research solvers, which are specialized algorithms designed for these kinds of optimization tasks, and other learning-based models. The key metrics are tour length, so a shorter path is better, and optimality gap, which measures how far off the solution is from the absolute best, ideally 0. Their model performs very competitively here, achieving tour lengths and optimality gaps that are quite close to these highly specialized solvers. So to really understand what makes their model tick, the researchers did an ablation study. That's where they test different components to see which ones are key. This table shows results from such a study, focusing on sorting 52-digit MNIST images. It compares different forward mixing methods, their chosen riffle shuffles against others, like random transpositions. And for the reverse unmixing step, it tests approaches like their generalized Plackett-Luce distribution, a theoretically more expressive way to model item order, and the standard Plackett-Luce, sometimes using beam search, a technique to find better solutions. The data clearly shows riffle shuffles, paired with these learned reverse models, give the best sorting performance, while other combinations struggled significantly. Building on those ablation results, which highlighted the importance of their generalized Plackett-Luce distribution for the reverse unmixing step, this figure offers a concrete example of its power. It illustrates what they call the expressiveness theorem on S3. That's the set of all possible ways to order three distinct items. You can see how, from a starting configuration, the model can learn to assign specific target probabilities to different permutations. This visually demonstrates that their generalized Plackett-Luce distribution is indeed flexible enough to represent quite complex patterns of preference among these orderings. So, that visual really underscores the flexibility of their generalized Plackett-Luce distribution. In essence, this research on symmetric diffusers introduces a clever way for AI to learn about order. They use a discrete diffusion model, a process of gradually scrambling data and then learning to reverse it, to understand finite symmetric groups, which are all the possible arrangements of a set of items. The key takeaway is that this method, using efficient riffle shuffles for scrambling and expressive models for unscrambling, achieves excellent results on diverse tasks like sorting, puzzles, and even the traveling salesman problem. It's a really strong contribution for permutation learning. That's all for this AI Research Roundup. I'm Alex. Thanks for listening.